The Steelers have stolen Justin Fields from the Bears. Well, Mike Williams is visiting 3 teams this week. We'll hit on the most recent NFL news, plus tell you which 2 running backs will make the biggest jump in fantasy points this season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst over at NFL Network.
I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy, betting, free agency draft, you name it, for sportingnews.com. We just turned 138 years old. So happy birthday to us, and we're turning it around here and giving you the insight you need to dominate your fantasy football leagues.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Vinny, as a Steelers fan, this week has been absolutely wild. I cannot think of a crazier week in our, since I've been alive for this team. It's been crazy. So first they sign Russell Wilson, right? Then they trade away Kenny Pickett. And then all of a sudden, what was it, Saturday night when this happened, or Saturday during the day, Justin Fields gets traded to the Steelers for a 2025 conditional 6th-round pick that can become a 4th if he plays more than 51% of the snaps this year. This kind of stinks for Justin Fields' fantasy value, right? He's going to be a backup. Now, what are your thoughts about Fields in the long term? Do you think he gets another starting role in the near future, in the next couple seasons?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, Russell Wilson is only under contract here for this year. So they're going to assess what they get out of Wilson, and he's going to be a bridge quarterback potentially here because he's going to turn 36. Justin Fields will turn 26. So an entire decade between these two. So we know Russell Wilson, unless he really shows out here, I'm not confident that he's going to turn into the next Drew Brees, play into age 40 at a high level, or Tom Brady, anything close to that. So he has to really prove himself. That's the deal he's gotten here. And the Broncos are picking up most of the tab. He's only getting $1.2 million from the Steelers. So now the pressure's on Russell Wilson. Who's going to do well in this offense? And we talked a lot about Justin Fields. He'd be a great fit for the Falcons. Well, that was the previous Falcons, and those teams were coached by Arthur Smith, who's the offense coordinator of the Steelers. So it makes a lot of sense to put this combination together, and they acted quickly. They didn't keep Mitchell Trubisky or Mason Rudolph. Those guys quickly signed elsewhere. Kenny Pickett, a deal came up with the Eagles. They had to jump on there. So a lot of maneuvering here. They blow up the quarterback room, essentially, and then now they're not going to go in the draft and look at a quarterback at all. They just expended very little draft capital to get Fields and then didn't have to do anything to get Wilson. So Fields, Wilson, that's what you're going to have going forward. And Michelle, I think you've talked about it quite a bit on the show. You got to just swing for the fences here. Now they have a couple shots. Like if one of these lottery tickets pay off, then they're good. If they're both flops, so be it. They moved on from Kenny Pickett. They turned the page, go draft another quarterback, and we start this again until you hit it right. So now they've given themselves options, and they became really cheap options for them overall.
What's so nice is that there's hope for this team to have a good offense next year, right?
Yeah.
There was no hope if their plan was to go in with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph as a backup. Like, if that was their plan again, I would have had no faith in fantasy football, like any fantasy points from any of these guys. But I do think overall the upside of this offense is so much greater for Najee Harris, for George Pickens, now also that he's the wide receiver 1. They got rid of Diontae Johnson. They are going to have to figure out a wide receiver 2, but the team has already announced Russell Wilson will be the starter, right? So for Russell Wilson and George Pickens, I love that duo together. I think they'll be really good. But who else would you like to see here with the Steelers? Like, are they one of the teams that are a candidate to trade for Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel? Because that has been a big rumor over the last week that the 49ers could be looking to trade one of those guys. Do you see the Steelers as one of those teams that might do that with their maybe their first round pick at 20th overall? And which one would you prefer for this team, Debo or Ayuk?
Yeah, I mean, they've already made one really aggressive move that was on the defensive side and spending a lot of money on Patrick Queen. So this team definitely does not have a history of making aggressive moves, but keep in mind the GM was different. It was Kevin Colbert. Now it's Omar Khan. He seems to be new school, trying to make moves and manipulate them wherever they need to and not just settle. If Pickett wasn't good, he went out and improved and tried to get the situation better as quickly as possible. So they might do that again. The 49ers have to consider what they might get. I think what's hurting maybe the 49ers decision to maybe trade these guys because they think the same way the 49ers do is, oh, the wide receiver class is pretty strong in this class. So
Yeah.
if you look at the Steelers pick, yeah, they could go after an offensive lineman, but what if they pivot and one of the receivers that they like after the big three are gone, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze, you get to this point, I think there's a lot of different receivers who come into the conversation on who's fourth. Is it Brian Thomas Jr.? Is it A.D. Mitchell? There's a bunch of guys that you could get at 20 that could really help your team. But then is that really what they want to do? Are they going to maybe move up in the draft to get a Brock Bowers, right, and go in that direction? They could do that as well, even though they have Pat Freiermuth, because we know Arthur Smith runs more 12 personnel than any other team or any other.
Imagine
Coach.
Brock Bowers with Arthur Smith after how he's handled Kyle Pitts.
Well, he
I
did
think that
take
would make
care
the
of
fantasy
Jonnu
world.
Smith. Let's keep that in
Yeah.
mind. That's the
I think
kind
that
of
would make the
tight end
fantasy
Brock
world
Bowers
like
is.
freak out.
Yeah, I think he would be more traditional tight end, which he could figure out a little bit easier, right? And then that would be okay. Like you have Freiermuth and Bowers, and you use those guys in 12 personnel, and you run those guys out there, and you have George Pickens, the clear number one. He's going to remake the offense the way he knows. And I think the reason they went after Wilson and Fields, and I think that's a bit of an underrated storyline in terms of why this combination, why now? Well, I don't think it's just an afterthought that both of them can run, right? Wilson can still run if you let him go and take off and he's willing to run. And then we know Justin Fields, maybe the best explosive runner we've seen other than Lamar Jackson in this league. So that element is definitely going to be there. So look, if this situation happens where Wilson gets hurt and they would have to go with Justin Fields, you're looking at fantasy value immediately there. So I do think both of these guys have some appeal, but I think I would be a lot more interested in Fields because he's going to be more of that dedicated runner if he gets out there. But I do really like this again for all the people involved that are still there. George Pickens, the running backs, as you mentioned, Wilson with the checkdowns there. The Bears were heavily involved with their running backs last year because of Fields either throwing to them or running with them and supporting them as a runner. So there's a lot of things that really offshoot from both of these moves that can be successful. Now, I think if we're going to go for the passing element, I think we want Wilson in there with George Pickens. If we're going maybe, okay, we want to get Jalen Warren and Najee Harris more involved and more touches, maybe go to Justin Fields. But we know for now Wilson's a starter, so I think we have to lean toward Pickens being the better spike guy in this offense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with Pickens because he's going to have to be ranked as a top 12 guy if he goes into the season as a number one wide receiver. We'll see if they make a trade for one of these big names. We'll see what kind of draft capital they use on a wide receiver. But right now it's looking really good for him. And then to move over to the Caleb Williams side, right? Because we're just assuming now we're just placing Caleb Williams as the number one overall pick for the Bears now that they officially moved on from Justin Fields. And we talked about this on Friday's show, I believe, Caleb Williams is coming into a situation now with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. He has still Cole Kmet. They added Gerald Everett. They added DeAndre Swift. Like really nice pieces around him. We know he's mobile enough to get some rushing yards as well. It's scramble, make crazy plays, big arm. So how high should he be drafted when we're ranking him for just 2024 fantasy? Like in his rookie year, let me give you some questions here. Would you rather Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence?
That's a tough call. What I need to know is how much Caleb Williams is being allowed to run in the new offense, right? I think
Well, you're not going to know.
Yeah, I'm not going to know, so I'll probably lean a little bit. It's close, but I would feel a little bit. Let's say this: I'd feel better about taking Caleb Williams later in my draft than Trevor Lawrence in the middle of my draft. I'll just say that.
Would you rather Tua Tagovailoa or Caleb Williams? And I bet you Caleb Williams ends up being drafted around these guys. I don't think Caleb Williams is going to fall to, he'll probably be a 9th, 10th round pick or 8th, 9th, 10th round pick just with all these other guys. So Tua or Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I think because of the running, I mean, if I'm feeling that Williams is going to do any running, Tua doesn't do it at all. So I would have to lean there. And he's got more weapons now. You have to say all of a sudden to spread the ball around, right? I'm not saying he's got better weapons, but he's got more weapons, right? They could find the end zone. So I don't. It's going to be interesting. Caleb Williams has a big opportunity here. And look, last year we did pretty well. I mean, Anthony Richardson was probably going to be a very viable fantasy quarterback as a first round pick. And CJ Stroud, we know what he did. I mean, Bryce Young kind of whiffed, but there was nothing around him. But in the situations where there was something around the rookie quarterback, there was an opportunity to produce, especially if they did something with their legs. So I think Williams is more likely to produce than not, what we're looking for in fantasy football. And again, I'm not going to overdraft him, but I think he's got a QB2 with upside feel to him.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be hard to rank him because I think he goes right
Yeah.
there with all these guys, Jordan Love, Brock
Yeah.
Purdy. I
know.
would personally put him ahead of Lawrence and Goff. So he might be ranked as a top 10 guy, and that's pretty lofty for a rookie coming in his first year.
All right, we will get into some other news and notes in free agency. We'll reveal our biggest risers here based on where they moved in free agency, the best landing spot players. We'll get to all that on the rest of today's show. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right. No cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show here. And we have some other rumors. There's still some decent free agents out there. I'm not going to say a lot, but the big name that's kind of circulating, and to some degree, there's a smaller name behind him, but Mike Williams and another Michael Gallup, is also out there. So these are the receivers, I guess, the Panthers are most interested in. The Jets have talked about Mike Williams. So what do you think? Where do you want to see Mike Williams land? We know the Chiefs no longer need him here with Marquise Hollywood Brown there.
Well, they could still use him.
Yeah, they
I
could
don't want
probably
to say
still use
Marquise, but Mike Williams is visiting 3 teams this week, as we know of. It's the Panthers, the Jets, and the Steelers. So you would think those are the top 3 options from him, and he would decide from there. Again, he's only 29 years old, won't be 30 until October. I still think he has a lot in him. Tore his ACL last September, so has had plenty of time to recover. His biggest issue is the missing games, right? He's missed 18 games over the last 2 seasons, but in the games he has played, he averaged nearly 72 receiving yards per game. Since 2018, he leads the NFL in yards per reception among players with 250 plus receptions, like that great deep target. So personally, as a Steelers fan, I do think it's a nice fit with Russell Wilson. The only issue is George Pickens and Mike Williams are kind of very similar players. But hey, Russell Wilson works best with those players, right? Like he did with the DK Metcalf, like he did with Cortland Sutton. Those are the players he shines with. Even Tyler Lockett, he was so good with him on the deep passes, right? So if that's who he shines with, maybe you get him 2 of those guys instead of just 1. I will say with the Panthers, now they have Diontae Johnson. They have Adam Thielen still, and then Jonathan Mingo. So if they still believe in Mingo, who's an early 2nd round pick for them, it's kind of getting muddy there to just throw in a Mike Williams. The Jets would be an amazing landing spot with Aaron Rodgers because you get Garrett Wilson on one side, then Mike Williams on the other. And those are really your 2 guys. So I would love that best for Mike Williams when it comes to fantasy points. I think that's the best landing spot for him.
Yeah, I think you look at the Panthers, what are they trying to do? Trying to recreate the Buccaneers wide receiver core to some degree in those specific roles. Now you had not that consistent number 3 presence. You did have Chris Godwin, who's kind of the slot hybrid. He played a lot on the outside last year. So you have that kind of in Adam Thielen, and you have Diontae Johnson, which gives you a little bit of a leg up from what the Bucs were. I think they were going to have some plans for Russell Gage. Those things blew up when Gage got hurt last year. So this is going to be more of an 11 personnel team. So they need to get 3 decent wide receivers. And Williams would be like the Mike Evans role, the guy on the outside that stretches the field and tries to make some big plays for Dave Canales. So that makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot of questions about Bryce Young and that offense. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, there's not a lot to throw to there. So, yeah, you'd say playing off the coverage that Garrett Wilson gets, Williams is going to look pretty good. Now, I think when you look at the Steelers, I think it's a bit redundant, right, to have him and George Pickens. That was what I would worry about a little bit, that it's not the greatest. I think they're probably looking just to look, right? They need to keep improving their receivers, but I don't think he necessarily fits what Arthur Smith wants to do. I think a Brock Bowers in the draft will much do that a little bit better for their offensive scheme. So something to look at. I still think Mike Williams is there, but he's always a risk, right? His injury history is just so extensive. He's getting older. He's going to be 30 here pretty soon as well. So we'll see what he has left in the tank, but I bet the team that signs him is not going to have to spend all that much money. So I think, look, I'm really surprised how quickly this free agent pool dried up. There's not a lot out there. I mean, we're now seeing these backup type guys like Braxton Berrios and Chris Conley go back to their own teams at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr. were franchise tagged and then Mike Evans re-signed, it was already pretty dried up even entering free agency. Really, Mike Williams getting cut has added some excitement to this pool a little bit instead of it just being Hollywood Brown and Calvin Ridley. I do think Mike Williams is a really good wide receiver, and I get you when you're saying redundant with George Pickens, but again, if this is who Russell Wilson thrives with, that type of player, then maybe it's best he has 2 of those guys. But then also, like you said, Michael Gallup, who really cares, right? If he signs, he should be a wide receiver 4, maybe a wide receiver 3 on whatever team he joins. I will say there was news today that popped up that Alexander Madison was going to visit the Raiders. Now, any other destination, not any other, but most destinations, you would say, okay, who cares? But with the Raiders, they have Zamir White and nobody else. So this would be one landing spot where you're like, I guess he could have the opportunity. What would you think about that landing spot when it came to your boy Zamir White?
I'd feel the same about AJ Dillon going back to the Packers. I think you have to sign backups. When your depth chart is bare, you got to get some backups. So Alexander Madison is that, right? He's a backup, and that's what you're going to sign him for. So
is Zamir White.
Yeah. Well, no. You saw him down the stretch. There was some special running from him.
Remember when Madison was special down the stretch when Dalvin Cook got hurt?
As explosive as Zamir White.
And then once he was the lead
never
back,
got 24
no
carries.
special.
So I mean, that's the thing, is he was treated as like a workhorse down the stretch. And Zamir White, look, all those backs out of Georgia have done something for the most part. So it's really hard not to like that pedigree. But look, Zamir White, I'm just going to say I'm not that invested in the Raiders offense. I need to see more, right? I'm not going to be thrilled about Gardner Minshew opening up and unlocking all their weapons. It's not going to happen. But that said, they could be a very run-dependent team, right? They have a defensive-minded head coach in Antonio Pierce, so they could go in that direction. Now, I think what's this doing here, Michelle, is that all these teams could be just going after their wide receiver in the draft. It's an interesting class because you have to the top 3, but I think there's a lot of speculation and kind of mixed feelings about the rest of the class. They're very good wide receivers, but I think there are different flavors out there. So I think this is, again, why you didn't see the wide receiver market go crazy. There's some teams out there like the Patriots that really need to tap into this. The Chargers, obviously, without Williams and Allen. So let me just leave you with this in the segment here. Are you interested, whoever the Chargers get there at number 5, whether it's Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or maybe Marvin Harrison, the Cardinals do something weird at number 4, are you immediately drafting that player as a potential wide receiver too, even though this is going to be a more run-heavy offense?
Absolutely, because they're the wide receiver one. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's not even like a good tight end there either. Like and not even a good running or pass catching running back. Like this guy should instantly enter and get 140 targets as a rookie. And whoever it may be, if he's going number 5, whether it be Neighbors or Adunze, or if Marvin Harrison were to drop there, they're all talented enough to handle that workload. So immediately I would have them ranked probably far too high and take that risk. And it's going to be the same thing with whoever lands with the Cardinals,
Yeah.
because with Kyler Murray, I mean, we're underestimating how good Kyler Murray is. So that landing spot is just as good as the Chargers landing spot, if not better, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, all of these guys going that early could be drafted as, I mean,
I might
Marvin
not be
Harrison
as
Jr.
hot on the Giants with a wide receiver
Yeah.
at number 6, but he would still be interesting, right? He would be extremely talented, whoever that is. And you would expect it to be either Neighbors or Adunze going to the Giants now that, I don't know, they got Drew Lock. So I don't know if they're going to be that interested in a quarterback here to compete with Daniel Jones in the draft, but we'll see all that in time. But yeah, I'm excited for this draft. I think that's where the biggest returns are going to come in fantasy now.
Yeah, we're gonna finish up the show in our final segment talking about the player that will make the biggest jump in fantasy points from 2023 to 2024. They just happen to be both free agent running backs that we chose. That wasn't like what we
Yeah.
set down to happen, but we both chose a free agent running back. So we'll hit on our guys in the next segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. I personally use the Game Time app like hundreds of times. I'm going to be completely honest. Anytime I'm going to a sporting event or a comedy show, I just kind of wait to the last minute, pull up the app, buy tickets with ease, and I know they got my back. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, you can just create an account on the Game Time app, redeem code Locked On, that's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So again, I brought up we're gonna talk about the guy that's going to make the biggest jump in fantasy points from last year to this year. Your guy that you're going to talk about, he wasn't too bad last year, but still a disappointment. So tell me why you like him more heading into 2024.
Yeah, let's remember how high Josh Jacobs did finish in 2022. I mean, he's right up there with the best scores. And Christian McCaffrey was a little bit better with his average down the stretch of the 49ers. But Josh Jacobs was the man. He led the league in rushing yards. He led the league in yards from scrimmage with the Raiders. And we knew he's going to take a step back last year. I mean, the Aiden O'Connell quarterback situation that happened over Jimmy Garoppolo did not help because there was not much to be scared about that offense. And some things broke down there. But now Josh Jacobs is with the Packers. They move on from Aaron Jones. They did bring back Dillon, as we mentioned, but he is the backup. That's all he can do here. He's not going to catch passes. And I think that's where Jacobs could really be effective here. In half-point PPR last year, however you look at it, he was the RB 18, which was disappointing, right? If you took Jacobs pretty high, I know we were already accounted for, okay, he's not going to do that again, what he did in 2022. But we said, okay, he might be the 8 to 10 running back in scoring conservatively, but he dropped all the way down to 18. So I think Josh Jacobs is a lot better than that. He's only 25. He's getting a change of scene here. The Packers still can be very productive with their running backs, and now Jordan Love is feared a little bit more because he's got a passing game. They're legit. There, you got to really respect Jordan Love as we go forward. So really good stuff here that we look at from the Packers. So I do like Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs in this entire offense this year, Michelle. So I think it's going to be special, and we're going to see the numbers come through here. So look, they're going to. I think Jacobs could catch 50 passes. I think that really could happen here and get targeted quite a bit on dump off. So that's what you need. You need that receiving to really bump up a player in half point or full point PPR. So I love Josh Jacobs being the guy. And I I think your guy is also a guy that's going to lead his team in touches.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about Zach Moss. I know. I promise not to talk about him all off season long, but talking about someone that's going to make the biggest jump. And I think this is going to be the first time in his career he has a really great fantasy season. So last year, running back 24 overall, running back 29 in average points per game in half PPR. But we know half the season, Jonathan Taylor took his job back, as he should, because Jonathan Taylor is one of the top running backs in the nation. But I'll say with Zach Moss, I always got frustrated with the way he was used with the Bills because he's a power back. He is like, not comparing his talent to Derrick Henry, but he's that type of running back that gets going the more carries he gets. Well, the Bills would give him a touch every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes and expect him to do something. That's not the back he is. He's not a change of pace back. In the 17 career games in which he had at least 12 carries, he has averaged 4.5 yards per carry. In all the other games, he averaged 3.95 yards per carry. So when he doesn't touch the ball, he struggles with efficiency. When he gets the carries, he is very efficient. He's a good pass blocker. He gets plenty good enough pass catcher. And now with this, he's with the Bengals offense, fully expecting him to be the lead back there. I know they lost Brian Callahan, but they promoted within their OC. So I expect this offense to be pretty close to what it was before. Not much change. So then you have to look at Joe Mixon and his usage. Mixon is one of 4 running backs that have 900 plus touches since 2021. That's with Henry, Najee Harris, and Josh Jacobs. He had the 4th most carries, 6th most targets among running backs over those 3 years. He also accounted for 62% of the Bengals' rush attempts over the last 3 seasons, second highest team percent in the NFL during that span. Only Josh Jacobs had more. But then what's also most interesting is that he led the league in carries inside the 5-yard line over the last 3 years. I shouldn't say led the NFL because Jalen Hurts had 3 more carries, but he led running backs. All right. He was right behind Jalen Hurts. And it's just like anytime the Bengals got near the goal line, that was pretty much just went to Mixon. He accounted for 72% of the Bengals rush attempts inside the 5-yard line over the last 3 seasons, by far the heaviest amount of team touches in that area among any player. So I think the usage that Moss is finally going to see, I've been waiting for forever. And I know he has the talent. He has the talent to be successful. He just needs the touches. I think he's finally in the spot to do that. So I'm not going to be shocked if he finishes as a top 12 running back next year.
Yeah, and I think they'll keep their offense what we saw in the past. And I keep going back to when they made their Super Bowl run, they had the right mix, right? You bring in Samaje Perine for a few touches. I think you'll see Chase Brown come into that role. I just think he's too small to hold up for too much. So there'll be calculated with his touches. So I think Zach Moss will see plenty of volume here. And it happened immediately. They got Moss, they traded Mixon to the Texans. So they were targeting him, right? Oh, this guy's available. So if we can get him, we can move Mixon and feel like we haven't really lost anything. And so, yeah, there's going to be a direct transition there to just making Moss the guy there. And that's what I like about both of these guys that we picked. Like, you can see a clear path to them being heavily involved because we know what the offenses are. There's no changes there. You know what the previous kind of backs could do in these offenses. So you know there are a lot of fantasy points to be had. So that's all right there for us. There's no guessing. We know exactly what their role is probably going to be like, and that's where you want. We want to take out as many variables. When we're looking at fantasy football, that's what we want to do. We want to go to the most trusted situations. We want the talent to line up. We know Moss showed that with the Colts last year. We know Jacobs, he obviously led the league in rushing. So I really do like these. I mean, I didn't think we were going to get these 2 guys maybe feeling a little bit better. I think you look at Saquon Barkley, maybe a little bit of a lateral move because, again, he's still going to be a big run and a big game dependent type guy. Tony Pollard, the jury's still out there. Derrick Henry might have more touchdowns, but we'll see about the rushing yards. So I think it clearly zeroes in on these 2 guys as being really good values for their teams in the end to be the lead backs here. So I'm really excited what we can get. And hopefully, look, there's a lot of veteran backs that move teams, but I think these 2 stand out, and hopefully they will get the required touches from their teams.
I'm so excited. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking about more fantasy goodness. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be getting into more draft talk. So if you want to learn about some of these prospects or what our thoughts are on these guys, make sure to tune in every day. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.